Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Comics. I am your host, Jim Viscardi, and this is the podcast where we dive into the craft, the business, and the stories behind the stories of some of the most exciting creators in comics. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce my guest because he is someone who bleeds the indie spirit. He is someone who's carved his own path in this business. He started doing some small press creator-owned books and then went to go make an impact over at Marvel and DC. Also has books coming out from Image Comics, which we're going to talk about. It's Matt Rosenberg. Matt Rosenberg started out with books like We Can Never Go Home Again and Four Kids Walk Into a Bank. And those books kind of proved early on what Matt wanted to bring to the table. Things like his dialogue, his storytelling, the way he builds characters, all kind of put him on the map. And also too, he's one of those creators who understands the business in such an intimate way that I think makes him someone that people should be looking at if they're not already, to see what he's doing to get attention on his books. But also he understands the direct market in a way that is really, really interesting. He's done work at Marvel and DC. I think there's a lot of things that he did over on X-Men and Punisher that turned a lot of heads in some ways, and we talk about that. We obviously talk a bit about what his Image book, What's the Furthest Place From Here. Again, a book where he did some pretty unpredictable things, which leads to a fun conversation. And then beyond all that, he's also a podcaster. He's the co-host of Ideas Don't Bleed with his admittedly. There's a story behind what Ashcan Press is, and I'm going to let him tell that. So you're just going to have to wait for that. So we'll jump right into the conversation. I do have some great listener reviews that have come in over the last couple of days, and so stay tuned to the end to see if yours gets read out loud, and if it does, I'll send you a sticker. Just got to make sure you shoot me an email. So today, again, we're going to talk about Matt's early days in comics, how he made the jump from indie to mainstream back to indie, and really built a career on his own terms. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's talk comics. Matt, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm not the only Matthew Rosenberg, but I will still take it.
Sure. You're the only one with the descriptors that I've given. The more famous one than me won a Pulitzer Prize, though. So I feel like I legally have to be like, there's another one, and he's better than me. But the thing that I didn't even mention is that you are also a podcast host.
Yes, unfortunately, that's true.
Look, podcast intros, they're the hardest part of this, I feel like.
For sure.
How do you handle those?
I co-host a podcast called Ideas Don't Bleed. I do it with Griffin Sheridan and Ethan Parker, who are comic book writers. They made the excellent Kill Your Darlings at Image, Eisner nominated on their first book, because that's just the kind of guys they are. And we like to, about 10 seconds before we start, one of the three of us will go, I have an idea for an intro, and not tell the others what it is. And then we go, and all of us are very bad at improv. It seems to be leaning towards skits now, which I hate. There's always an awkward thing where, like, we don't necessarily have the buy-in, or someone steps on the joke because they don't know what the joke is, and we do that for 10 minutes, and then we start the interview, and it's awful, it's terrible, but people listen to it every week, so I don't know we don't seem to be willing to stop it because of that.
What was the impetus for the show? Like, what, you just like, I want to do it?
No, definitely not. The impetus for the show was I got a deal with Substack, the newsletter company, and part of their deal was that they provided all sorts of support. If I needed certain things, they would give us, and one of the things they would pay for is production and producer fees if we did a podcast. But my deal specifically was I had to write a certain number of emails in a certain set of time. And it was right in the start of the pandemic, or like early, not the start, but early. And I was like, I used to travel the world and do interesting things and hang out with cool people and go out and do stuff. And I was like, now I don't leave my house, so I cannot send 2 emails a week about myself because it'll be the most depressing glimpse into my life, into anyone's life you've ever had. And so I was like desperately trying to figure out a way to make content that wasn't just me talking about me. And then I was like, well, I have all these friends in comics who I don't get to see as much because I'm not doing cons. And so, I just put out a call to, and I was really lucky, and Jason Aaron and Charles Soule and Kelly Thompson and Ed Brisson and Josh Williamson, James Tynan, all these people come on and are nice enough to give me an hour and a half of my time and listen to me fumble through a skit about them and then ask them a bunch of questions.
Well, so I feel like then, because with me doing this, I learn a ton, and obviously, like, there's an audience that has come around this show and your show, but for you, what do you feel you get out of it outside of being able to just like hang with some friends? I
mean, hang with friends is a big thing, but I also, I'm a student of comics. I've read comics my whole life. I love comics. And part of my creative process for a long time was just reading comics and just trying to absorb as much as I could from people's work, and work I love and work I hate, and work that wouldn't appeal to me, and all sorts of things. And obviously you can always learn and grow from that. And I still do that, but I think I've taken a lot of that as far as I can. I've read everything Alan Moore's written. I've read everything Grant Morrison wrote. I read everything Brian K. Vaughan wrote. Like, I've done that, and I want to keep growing. And so part of me intellectually was like, I wonder if I could just talk to creators and sort of literally pick their brains and rather than trying to dig through their work to try and get insight into them, but actually just ask them flat out. And we end up not doing that as much as I would like. What are your
secrets?
Yeah, just like, why are you so much better than me? Like, how do you do that? Like, this was a really cool thing, you did in a book, Tom King. Tell me a cool thing I could do in my book. And people are not as receptive to that as I thought. But we don't actually end up doing that as much. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. But that sort of was a big goal for me, is just to be like, I want to talk about people's thought processes on their books and where they come from and why they are the way they are. And there is stuff that I do learn for sure. And I think people do get information. And it also goes to other things, like we talk about marketing books or career choices and things like that, which are also, good to think about for me and for a section of the audience. So
what do you think is probably one of your bigger takeaways from someone you've spoken to? Because like you mentioned, obviously, like, those are some of the things obviously you're trying to get, but what would you say maybe has helped the most?
I think a big takeaway is enthusiasm for the work. I think we forget. I never want to be in a position, and I try not to be in a position where I'm not excited every morning when I wake up to go to work. Yep. But I see it when I talk to people, that the books they do that resonate with me the most are the books that they cared about the most, the books that meant the most to them. And, it's not necessarily the bestseller, not the biggest book, but like, I'll just... I'll say to someone like, I really love this. I love this. And their face lights up because you see that they love it and it connected in the way they wanted. And that stuff doesn't always translate to sales. It doesn't always translate to anything like that, but it translates in an intangible way into the quality of the work. And that's something that's always in my head, is just like, don't do the projects anymore that are paycheck projects. Like, I'm in a very privileged position that I don't have to be doing that. I can only do things that are like very important and passionate to me, and I think the work is better because of that.
So what is that book for you in that case then? Asking you to pick your favorite child.
It is Edge of Spider-Verse #1. I did write that book. I wrote Edge of Spider-Verse #1. Edge of Venomverse #1. I got the name of my own book wrong. Whatever. I'm sure there's an Edge of Spider-Verse #1. I didn't write it. I don't know who wrote it. I'm sure it's great. For me, it changes what that book is. But the books that it changes because I'm moody and what I'm into changes, what I feel like doing changes. But for me, like the most fulfilling work of my career has been, it started with Four Kids Walk Into a Bank, where I was like, oh, this is a very different kind of thing that feels so special and personal to me and so intimate. And then I made that book with Tyler Boss, and we continued on to make What's the First Place From Here, which is, a book that is almost oppositionally personal. It is almost difficult for people to get into. And I say all the time, like, it's a book that, like, is so much for me and Tyler that it is really an amazing feeling when other people are like, this book means a lot to me, because it feels so much like a confessional and so much like a dream project for both of us, that like finding a third person who's like, I like this matters. We're just like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's like someone else showing up in your dream and like actually sharing a dream with you. You're just like, oh, that's really special and weird and disturbing and fun. And now the same in a different way, my new book, which is coming out, We're Taking Everyone Down With Us, is something that is like deeply personal, deeply something I've been working on for years with Stefano Landini, my collaborator. And it literally just like, I my girlfriend makes fun of me because she can tell when I'm working on it, because she was like, you smile more when you're writing that book. She's like, you laugh at your own jokes in it, which is humiliating, but also, made me good.
Love it. All right. So, let's go back a little bit, and it's, I don't want, you've spoken on a number of different podcasts and done a bunch of interviews on your backstory and kind of how you got into comics and things like that, and we'll do kind of a lightning round version of that a little bit, just in case there are some folks who may not have, who don't know.
Sure.
At what point do you say to yourself, I'm going to give this a shot. I want to try. I love comics, but I want to try and do it myself. And what makes you do that?
So, yeah, I grew up reading comics, read comics my whole life, loved comics my whole life. Never dawned on me to try and make them. It dawned on me when I was 11, and I didn't draw like Jim Lee, and I didn't draw like Eric Larson, and I was so mad at myself that I was like, well, if I can't be Eric Larson, I don't want to make comics. And I gave it up. That was it. I gave it a good 6-month trial.
So was Larson your
it was
favorite? Initially?
No, it was Jim Lee, Larson, Todd, and Rob. Those were my guys.
Those guys.
Yep. I was a little Marvel nerd, and I followed them across the aisle when Image started, and I was a little kid, and was very excited. And yeah, those were the four of them. But for some reason, Eric was a guy. I knew for some reason I can't draw like any of them, but for some reason Eric, I was like, if I could draw, I think I would draw like Eric Larson. I don't know why.
Sure.
It's not easier to draw like Eric Larson than it is to draw like Todd or draw like Jim or any of the others. But for some reason, that was the one that I was like, I'm going to study Eric, and then I couldn't do it. But yeah, no, I loved all of them so much. I mean, I still do. I'm still a huge fan of all the Image founders.
Right.
I'm a huge, huge fan for life. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. But I didn't try and make comics. I wasn't thinking about it. I never thought about writing them. I never even thought about how like people who do write them. Like I had writers I liked, but I didn't ever dig into that more than just being like, oh, if your name's on a book, I'll pick it up. Mm-hmm. And it was actually I was working in the music business for a long time, and doing everything you can do in the music business that doesn't involve any ability. So like I can't play guitar at all. I can play bass horribly. I can play drums horribly. But anything else in music I can do. And I was just hitting a point where I was just burning out. It's a really brutal it's a really brutal industry, and a lot of people I know who are lifers in the music industry hate music because of that, and they're like, well, it's my job, but I don't listen to music, and I didn't want to do that, and but I also didn't want to learn any lessons from that, and so my idea was that I would do the only other thing I was passionate about, which was make comics. And actually, the impetus for it, the thing that was a lightning bolt for me, was finding out that Steve Niles, who was a big Steve Niles fan, I love 30 Days a Night, I love the Cal McDonald books. Finding out that Steve Niles was in one of my favorite bands. It broke up when I was a little baby, but like he was in Gray Matter, who were like a DC hardcore band, and it kind of just rocked my world that someone had moved from where I was into comics, and like that connectivity. And I was like, oh, I want to meet Steve Niles. I want to talk to him about early Discord. I want to talk to him about Minor Threat and Bad Brains and, Egg Hunt and all these bands that I really love. And then that started getting the ball rolling, where I was like, wait, if he can do this, could I do this? And like, the answer was no for a long time, but eventually, if you're dumb enough and persistent enough, the answer becomes maybe. And so that was it. It was really just seeing Steve Niles mention that he was in Gray Matter that really like opened a door for me, in a very weird way.
Nice. Well, and so then you jump right into, like, not only do you just like want to go and try and make stuff up, but like you just jump right into the self-publishing waters in a sense.
Yeah. I was bad at it, but yeah, I was, we were doing a webcomic. Dean Haspiel had a like collective that did a webcomic. And so I was doing a webcomic on Dean's site. And then, yeah, we were just hiring people and we were making pitches, to send to people and getting no response. A lot of the pitches were terrible, so they shouldn't have responded.
What do you think? I mean, looking back on them, what do you think? I mean, obviously, or what do you know was bad about them?
I think there was not a clear voice to them. I think that we were too concerned with high concept and not concerned enough with like characters or telling a good story. I think I was so eager to just find someone who could draw that I wasn't lining up talent with the idea that matched. So you'd get a very good, like, yeah, I'd have a cool crime idea, and then I'd just be like, well, this guy who draws in a manga style can do it, so he's going to do it. And then it would be like, well, people would be like, it's a manga crime book, and I'd be like, no, he just draws like that. And people would be like, but okay. And I wouldn't write to cater to them. So it was just an experience on every level. It was sloppy writing. It was sloppy in terms of thinking about the way publishers approach work and ideas. It was sloppy in the way you find collaborators. Like, there, and it just wasn't good. But then the things that were sort of working, I hit a point where I was so sick of just pitching that I was like, well, I'm just gonna make whole issues and I'll just bring them out. And because when you make a pitch, you show it to 10 people, and if they say no, that's it. And I was like, that's the most I want to at least have something that I can show to 50 people, that I can give to a friend or a family member, and not be like, this is the first 5 pages of a story that's never going to happen. Like, that's not an engaging thing to give to your parents. Like, that's not anything. So we switched to doing pitches, and that's where I go by the social media moniker or whatever of Ashcan Press. That's that idea of like, we were making ashcans, we were making little pitches, and we were like, well, maybe it'll look better if it looks like it comes from a publisher. And so I named it Ashcan Press, without realizing that that's exactly the opposite, that a publisher would be like, so someone else is already publishing this? And then I'd be like, no, it's me, stupid. So yeah, there's a lot of missteps early on. I didn't know anyone who made comics. Like, I didn't know anyone who made comics.
Right.
And so it was literally like just voraciously reading Wizard to try and get tips, reading the Comics Journal, and just being like, okay, well, this is how, Gary Panter got a book made. Like, is that what I'm going to do? Like, I would just grab at any piece of information to try and figure out how to do it. And like, it took a long time for me to realize a big problem was that I was looking to like people I looked up to rather than looking for a peer group. And when I found a peer group of creators who are now, for the most part, doing really well, and like my peer group, I lucked out to have a lot of friends and peers who are like working comic book writers, and that's awesome. But
that's so funny. That's something that actually came up in my chat with Dennis Camp, in that he had a lot of folks in his peer group who he saw kind of go and get bigger work kind of ahead of him, and now he's kind of having this mega moment for him. How important is, like you mentioned, obviously it was important for you to find that peer group, but what specifically in finding the peer group makes it kind of an integral part to your early career?
Oh man, it's everything. It's from learning how the industry works, like learning how people get books made and how they do this, to literally, like, I mean, my first few books were either lettered by Frank Barberi, who wrote Five Ghosts and all this other stuff, and was like a guy I knew from the punk scene. I knew his brother was in a band, and like I said I'm making comics to his brother, and he was like, my brother makes comics. And he was like, you should call him. And I just cold called him. I was like, hey, I'm friends with Lewis. Can we get coffee and talk about comics? And he was like, yeah. And he's one of my best friends for, more than a decade. But like Ed Brisson, who makes a ton of books and, signed at Marvel with me and like all that stuff, he lettered the other half of my books. So like I was literally learning, like I didn't know letterers. I knew other comic creators who were like, I letter my own books. And I'd be like, can I pay you to do mine? Because I didn't know a letterer. But also just like, they would also, this editor's looking for pitches, or this person, here's their like sharing emails was huge, and like it was hard to get that information. But also, it's pretty daunting at first. It gets pretty like there's a lot of rejection, there's a lot of failure, and seeing people make it is such a huge thing. When Frank got Five Ghosts going at Image, like it was like that scene in Goodfellas when they're like, Joe Pesci's going to get made. He's going to be a made man. And they're all like, this matters for us. Like, we're going to be made men. One of our guys made it. And like, Joe Pesci gets shot in the back of the head. Spoiler. But, Frank's still alive. So we're all happy about that. But that was a big thing. I mean, and there were so many like, I would go to cons and there'd be 8, no one would make money because no one knew who we were. So there'd be 8 of us in a hotel room, and it would be me and Frank and Brisson and Michael Walsh and Brian Level and Steve Orlando. And we'd all, they still all make fun of me because I, from years of touring with bands, I would get to a hotel room early and I would claim under the desk. And I'd be like, under the desk. And they'd be like, you don't claim the bed? And I'm like, no, under the desk. You want to be under the desk. And everyone's like, why? And I was like, no one steps on you. Like, that's where you sleep so no one steps on you. And so still, like, Brisson and Brian Level and Frank are always like, they'll just be like, under the desk. And I'll be like,
oh, that's really
the best
funny.
place to sleep.
Do you feel that your time doing the music industry stuff maybe gave you a leg up on trying to, just keep yourself kind of self-motivated in that sense?
Yeah. I think the thing for me early on, I was studying all these writers I love, and, I'm sitting down and just dismantling Ex Machina and just like trying to figure out how it works. And I was just like, I can't do this. Like, I can't make my brain do this. It's so compelling and so brilliant. And like, I made the decision that I was like, I can't necessarily trust that I'm going to walk into a room and be the best writer, but I can trust that I can be the hardest working writer. Like, that's something in my control. I can just go harder. And I didn't know exactly how to manifest that for a long time. And then I realized, I was like, oh, there's so many things in comics that like are easier than in music. Like, I used to put out records, and you'd cold call record stores all day, and you'd get record store on the phone, you'd give them the pitch for 10 minutes, and then at the end of it, they'd go, who's your distribution? And you'd say, and they're like, we don't carry from that distributor, and hang up on you. And you'd be like, well, okay, that was a good 15 minutes of my life just completely wasted. When I found out that, I was like, oh, it's just Diamond? Like, okay, that's a leg up. I'm on the same footing as Spider-Man. I'm on the same footing as Batman. And there's a lot of stuff like that where I was like, well, I'll just go and do these things that no one else will do to try and hustle, that aren't writing, that aren't creative, but like, there are hours in the day I can spend. And like, I spent a good month going into Comic Shop Locator and typing in every zip code.
I heard that story. Yeah,
so
to make
that
the list.
Yeah, to make a list, because no one had a list, because Diamond was very protective of their list of retailers. And I was just like, yeah, I'm going to make my own retail list. And I would find a store, and then I would Google it, and I would find their social media, I'd find their email, find their phone number, and then I'd start reaching out and be like, hey, I have a book coming out. is it a great use of my time? No, but like it fed into the idea that I was like, well, I'm working really hard at this, and it will pay off at some point.
Sure.
And I would
Do
love
you
to
feel
be
that now at this point that's endeared you
to shops,
to the industry? Well,
to the industry,
to the shops and to the industry in a way that
I don't know. If I was someone else, I'd find it obnoxious. But no, I think for certain people, yes. I think I have a lot of friends who will hit me up and who make books who are like, I actually don't. They'll say like, I'm going to this town. Is there a shop? And I'd be like, this is my favorite shop in this town. This is this place, or like, or like I'm trying to announce something. Where's a good place? And I'll be like, this person does a really good blog, or this person has a good podcast. Like, go on there. And so like in that regard, to the people who have access to me, I think they find me very helpful. And I think a lot of shops, I mean, I still try and do that stuff as the thing.
Right.
Like
that's what I mean. Like it's a thing that you were doing to try and break in, but it's also a thing that you're still doing now. And so your sense of hustle hasn't diminished.
No,
bit.
it Tyler Boss makes fun of me all the time because he's like, every time we do a book, you're like, I'm doing this work this time so we don't have to do it next time. And he's like, and then next time you come back with a bigger plan. And he's like, you don't ever do that. And so like the hustle on Four Kids Walk Into a Bank was much smaller than the hustle on What's the First Place From Here. And that's smaller than the hustle on We're Taking Everyone Down With Us, because I'm just like, yeah, well, now it's a building thing. Now it's sort of expected. And I would like to one day just be like, I put out a book. But I also... I think
I don't know. I feel like you'll never get to that. Not you won't ever get to that point, but I don't think you will ever be comfortable just being like, oh, I just put out a book.
Oh yeah, I don't know that I will either. I don't. When I do the corporate work, when I do stuff at Marvel and DC, like they don't want you doing that stuff. Like they have a team that does that, and they're just like, don't do that. Like we handle the messaging. Like we like to control the brands, right. And I get it, and I hate it.
But 90% of the time they also don't do it.
Well, it's a different conversation. But
sure.
I mean, they have a lot of books and they have a lot of stuff to put out. But like, yes, is my weird zombie, superhero Red Hood as a zombie book gonna be the top priority for them? No, it's certainly not. Would it have benefited from me calling some people? Probably, but like not that much. But it's just it's also not my thing, and it's like, well,
not your monkeys, not your circus.
Yeah, I can't go and be like, I'm gonna go buy 2,000 stamps and mail out postcards because I have to promote Wildcats. I'm like, well, I don't get that money back. Like that does not. Right. They're not like, oh, you did so good on that, here's a bonus on Wildcats. They're like, you shouldn't have done that. Like that's your rent. Right. And so yeah, in that regard, I don't do it, and I find it very frustrating. But also, I'm a work obsessive to an unhealthy degree. Like I wake up, I before I get up and piss and brush my teeth, I check my email. Like I'm that guy. It's awful.
Right. I know exactly. I am that person too. So
it's the worst. It's the worst person to be. But I love the things that I can do, because so much of my work is writing or figuring out story, and that stuff is very mentally taxing. That I love the chance to turn my brain off and do like. I mean, I just watched. I'm rewatching Atlanta now because it's one of the best shows ever made. And I just watched 7 episodes of Atlanta and put stamps and labels on postcards to mail to shops. And I was like, it's relaxing. It's like I'm moving forward. I'm making progress. I'm working, but in a way that doesn't take up any brain space and doesn't require anything of me other than time. And I can do something else. And that is like a joy to me. That is better than a walk in the park. That is better than, a day at the spa. I love that. So
I get no. So I'd love to. You've done at this point. You have done you've had a healthy career in the amount of work that you've done. At what point did whether it's in the early part of your career or maybe it's in the later part of your career, when do you feel like you've established your voice?
Man, I don't know that I have. I haven't.
Like, is there a light bulb? Is there a light bulb moment, or is there a part where do you feel that you started writing something, whatever the project was, and you're like, oh, I get this, and like,
yeah. So yeah, there's sort of two different things for me there. There's the moment where everything clicks for you on the book, and that to me is very specific to every book. Sure. Like I and maybe it's just that I have to rediscover it, but unfortunately I take a really long time to make creator on books, because I gestate on them a lot. I think on them for a long time. Like, We're Taking Everyone Down With Us is a book we started in the beginning of the pandemic. Like, we've been working on it for years, and you can see it on Hassan, our letterer. I owe him infinitely, because he's done whole different versions of the first issue where characters have different names, where like tones of scenes have changed, where scenes are rearranged in the order so dialogue has to be adjusted. And it's because I do something and I sit on it, and then I'm writing issue 3 and I'm like, oh no, this guy's actually actually a jerk, and I have to go back and fix it. And there's actually a funny thing, because we mailed out copies of We're Taking Everyone Down With Us to retailers, and we sent out preview copies. Image was great, and sent out review copies. There's pages that are in those that are not in the final book. So like, if you're a completist collector person, right, go try and find the retailer copy, because there's literally different scenes. Like there's a whole scene that's different, and there's a page that like is completely different, and there's a splash page that was redrawn weeks ago, because me and Stefano were like, yeah, we changed the tone of this, and it feels better if it's this way, if this person is more of this. And eventually I like that the train starts to move so much that I can't keep changing where the track goes. But if I have the room, I'm going to always George Lucas it and be like, new special edition dropped. Like, yeah, now he steps on Jabba. Like, that's just how it's going to be. So yeah, I'm finding my voice up until the very end, and then I'm walking away sort of throwing my hands up being like, it's done. But in terms of like a general, like, well, this is what a me book feels like. Yeah. I think I actively, there's things that are always there, because I'm always going to do that. There's always going to be, some humor. There's always going to be some darkness. There's always going to be certain types of humor. I had a funny talk with Kelly Thompson recently where we were talking about our time writing Uncanny X-Men together, and there were scenes where we didn't know which of us wrote them. We couldn't tell. And Kelly came back and was like, it's really funny that we don't know who wrote this scene. And it was a few of them where I was like, I don't remember if that's me or you. And she was like, my general rule of thumb is if it ends up being too sweet, I wrote it. And she said, and if it ends up being too dark, you wrote it to me. She said, if it goes to a really cynical place, it's Matt, and if it goes to actually a kind of overly optimistic place, it's Kelly. And she's like, also, if the jokes are kind of adorable and like cringeworthy adorable, she's like, that's a Kelly joke. And if the jokes are kind of inscrutable and weird and you can't exactly tell what the joke is, she's like, that's Matt. And I was like, yeah, I think that tracks. Like, that's us. Like, I make a lot of jokes wherever, and it's just like, I don't know what that means, and I'm just trying to make myself laugh. And so I have a weird sense of humor. I've come to learn, and so like those things are sort of trademarks. But no, I mean, I'm always trying. Like, We Can Never Go Home feels like a different book than Four Kids Walk Into a Bank in a lot of ways, and Four Kids feels different than What's the Furthest Place From Here, and What's the Furthest Place From Here feels very different, because I'm like, I don't want to feel like I have a specific thing I do. A lot of them deal with young people, because there are certainly I latch on to themes, and I spend a lot of time working on a theme, and then I finish it and I put it away, and then a year passes, and either I've changed or the world has changed or whatever, but I look back on a book and I go, no, that wasn't right. Like, I didn't have a good perspective on that. And I go back and I start thinking about that again, and then that becomes the next book. Is sort of they're all a sort of running conversation. So in that regard, that's sort of a thing, but it's not necessarily intentional as much as I'm just obsessive and weird.
All right. Well, so tell me about how you got your first work for hire stuff. Like, what kind of went into that? Was that just based off just kind of heat and excitement that you had with, your self-published stuff, or was it part of, was it a peer group thing that said, oh, hey, you should check out?
No, So my first I had a short story in an anthology that Black Mask published, and then I had, through music connections, ended up doing this project with guys from the Wu-Tang Clan. I did this book called 12 Reasons to Die with RZA and Ghostface. And that was a funny one because I did the book and it has amazing artists in it, like, Joel Jones and Nate Powell and Tim Seeley, and it's just a murderer's row of great artists working on it. And I was like, it's actually much more clever than you'd think a tie-in book should be. It's 2 timelines and they sort of interlock and overlap, and I went into that convinced. I was like, when this book drops, like, I'm going to be writing Batman. Like, they're going to give me Avengers. And I was very confused by issue 4 when I was like, does the X-Men office not read rap comics? Are they not paying attention to the current rap comics? And so I spent a long time, not that long, but I scrambled and put my next creator-owned book together, and Black Mask, who published the Wu-Tang book, greenlit it, and I did We Can Never Go Home. And I sort of had put the idea of like, well, Marvel's going to come knocking. Like, as soon as a quality comes through the door, they'll come knocking. And I had abandoned that thought entirely and was like, well, I have to do a bunch of books for a bunch of years and sort of earn my place. And then We Can Never Go Home 1 came out, and I think the day We Can Never Go Home 2 came out, Jake Thomas, who was my longtime editor at Marvel and is now the head of Humanoids, emailed me and was like, hey, man, this is cool. Do you want to do a short story? And it literally, as soon as I stopped thinking about it all the time, it happened. And it happened. I'd written, the Wu-Tang book is sort of a license, sort of not. It's a weird thing, but like, I don't own it, but it wasn't also work for hire. I sort of put it together. So it's a weird thing. So like, I'd literally written professionally, had 40 pages of creator-owned work out there when Marvel knocked, which was sort of unprecedented. Now their system's a little different, and people come in never having written a comic, and that's what it is. But at the time, it was pretty jarring, and yeah, that was my first thing, is that I did a story, and John Hickman was doing Secret Wars, and they had a spin-off that was just shorts that were taking place on different battle worlds, and they said, do you want to do a story in Secret Wars Journal? And I was like, yes, can I do an X-Men story? And they said yes. And I sent in an X-Men story, and I remember clearly I turned it in, and Jake was like, hey, can we jump on the phone? And I said, yeah. And he was like, your first page has 36 X-Men in it. Most of them don't do anything in the story or speak. What's going on? And I said, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to write the X-Men again. So I wanted to be able to say I got all my favorites in. And he was like, okay, yeah. And credit to Luca Pizzari, who drew it and is a great artist, and he definitely sent a snippy email being like, why the hell are there so many characters here who don't do anything? And Marvel was like, yeah, we're gonna let this one go, and he did it, and he drew them awesome, and he redesigned every single one of them, which I hadn't thought about, but he had to do, and the redesigns are awesome, and he did it for a background panel, and then that was it.
Did you think though, from there you were like, that's it? Or yeah, either like, well, yeah, was it either I'm in or, I did it?
No, it was very
They're
much
never going to invite me back.
It was very much a I did it. I have I'm very goal oriented, and so I spent a long time being like, these are my goals. These are career goals, and for a long time, write X-Men. Just write the X-Men was like the top of the pyramid, and I got to it so fast that I was like, shit, like I don't know what to do now. And I had to reassess, and I was like, well, I really like the Punisher and Batman, and like I like Green Arrow, and just was like adding characters, which is not really how your career goal should work. But it was really like, yeah, I sort of was satisfied. I mean, I wanted to do more, and I wanted to be able to eat and pay my bills, and Marvel was very great about all of those things. But I didn't, I said, like, anything else you want me to do, I'm happy to do, but I fully expected that to be done, and whatever. And it was for a little bit. I didn't get any follow-up work for a bunch of months, and the only reason I got follow-up is this is a funny story that I don't ever tell. I was shopping at my local comic shop at Midtown Comics, and I saw Jordan White, who was a Marvel editor, who I'd talked to in person once or twice, walked in, and I was like, oh, I should go say hi to him. And then behind him were Gerry Duggan, Cullen Bunn, and Jeff Lemire. Oh. And I was like, oh. And I knew Gerry. I'd met Gerry a few times, and I I never met Jeff, and I met Cullen like once, and just said, you know, like, I'm a fan to Cullen. And they came in, and so I like was going up to them and talking to them and all this stuff, and then I was like, why are you guys here? And they're like, we're here for a summit, but Charles Soule is signing here. And I was like, Charles isn't signing here. He's signing at the downtown store. And they were like, what? And I was like, there's more than one Midtown, and he's not here. He's like 70 blocks away. And they were like, how long will it take to get there? And I was like, it'll take you like 45 minutes on the train to get there. And they were like, not going to see Charles, I guess. And so they're like, okay, let's go out for a drink. And I was like, well, it's really good to see you. And Gerry grabbed me and pulled me aside, and he was like, come out for drinks. And I said, no, man, I don't want to intrude. And he was like, you need to intrude. Come out for drinks. And I was like, I feel weird. And he was like, no, come out for drinks. And I didn't know Gerry that well at the time. And so I was like, sure. Gerry was like, hey, Matt, do you want to come out for drinks? And I was like, yeah, if that's okay. And everyone was like, yeah, come. And I went out. I stayed for a drink. And then I was like, it was really good. You guys got stuff to talk about. Good hangouts. And the next morning, Jordan White emailed me and was like, do you have any thoughts about doing a Rocket Raccoon book? And that was it. And It's just, you know, I love Jordan. Jordan's a great editor, and credit to him. But Gerry is the reason that I got in the door more than anything, I think. Gerry teaching me to be obnoxious.
What about some of those early experiences doing work for hire would you say maybe you didn't expect about the comics making process?
I didn't expect how fast it worked. How just like relentless the pace is. Like, you just don't. I mean, on that Rocket Raccoon book, Jordan called me on emailed me on a Tuesday morning and said, do you want to do this? Do you want to send me some ideas by Friday? And I said, you'll have ideas by the end of the day. And I sent him 5 ideas. And at the end of the day, he was like, we like this one. Do you want to get me an outline by Friday? And I was like, you'll have an outline tomorrow. And I stayed up all night and wrote an outline. And at the end of the next day, he said, do you want to get me a script by Friday? And that was like a huge wake-up call for me, that I was like, oh, I've made a horrible mistake. Like, I killed myself to prove that I'm the fastest man alive, and now they expect me to be the fastest man alive, and I am not. And so that was a big one that it took me a long time to learn from. But also, I think a big thing for me is it was navigating, like, not power structures, but how different people are treated and how they view themselves. Like, I signed exclusive to Marvel the same month that Ed Brisson did, Donny Cates did, and Chip Zdarsky did. They signed up, the 4 of us together, and Kelly was the next month, Kelly Thompson. And it was fascinating because we all walked in off of indie books that were kind of buzzy, having done a few things at Marvel here or there. And we were all pretty new, and like, but just how they treated everyone differently was so fascinating, because like the way they interacted with Chip and Donnie and me and Ed, there was clearly no template, and a lot of it was figuring out who they think you are, so you can either play that part or try and not play that part. And it's a fascinating thing to try and figure out who you are to other people, and especially if the people are controlling your career. And so that was a long time of like, you know, me and Donnie would spend a lot of time being like, he'd be like, I want to do this thing. And I'd be like, this is how I'd approach it. And he'd be like, well, this is how I'd approach it. And he would give me the same advice. And like, our advice would never work for each other, because they wouldn't know what to do if Donnie was like, well, I'd like to do this. And Donnie being kind of mild-mannered and like jokey about something, they would be like, no. And if Donnie walked in and was like, this is what I'm doing and it's going to rule, they'd be like, all right, I guess. And if I walked in and was like, this is what I'm doing, it's going to rule, they'd be like, okay, goodbye. And I'd have to go in and be like, hey guys, this is kind of a weird one, but you know, this might work. And they'd be like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. And they get excited. And it was different for everyone. Like,
right.
And, you know, I know watching Kelly navigate it was different for Kelly. And you know, like when I was there, Bendis was there, and he would tell me like, yeah, they don't treat you the way they treat. I mean, they shouldn't treat me the way they treat Bendis, but like,
sure,
you know, like everyone is handled differently, and and that was a big thing. And it helped me define who I wanted to be in my career and what I wanted to do work-wise. And it, you know, that's a growing process and a learning process. There's like, I look back and there's things that I'm like, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have acted this way. I shouldn't have handled this way. I shouldn't have done that project or whatever. but then shout out to Edge of Venomverse #1. But then it's like one of the best-selling comics I've ever written. Edge of Venomverse #1. I wrote it in a hotel room in Mexico in 24 hours because that's what I had. And they were like, "Cool, it sold like 170,000 copies." And I'm like, "Oh my god, okay." It's a setup for an event that I didn't know what the event was about until after I wrote it. It's a weird one. People really like it. They made a pop vinyl of it. I have it. Yep. It's cool. But yeah, there's a lot that you learn, and I mean, the thing I like about comics is that I'm always learning about how to handle things and how to, the industry changes and you change, and it's a whole you don't stand in the same river twice thing. Like I'm not the creator I was when I was at Marvel or when I started at DC or when I was making books at Black Mask, and the industry isn't that, and the audience for a large part isn't that, and that's fun to me. That's exciting.
Well, so I think, but like one of the things too, also just even looking just at your Marvel career for right now, is you've written a bunch of projects that kind of cross a number of different tones, right? Mm-hmm. Crime, your kind of standard superhero stuff, horror, and you've got comedy and all that. How do you shift gears between that and make sure that you're finding the right voice there while also kind of still trying to make it, a Matt Rosenberg book?
Yeah, I think shifting gears is, as much as the Matt Rosenberg book is anything, it's shifting gears in awkward, crazy ways. I do think that, not to go back and answer a question 2 questions ago, but if there's anything that's probably a hallmark of what I do, it's that I'm like smashing different genres together. That like the horror book is going to have jokes in it, and the comedy book is going to have something really horrific in it, and there's going to be drama in the light stuff, and
so it becomes a more conscious decision then for you.
Yeah, it's a conscious decision for sure. I mean, I really am a firm believer in the roller coaster, that like you have to have the ups to make the downs work, and you have to have the drops to make the climbs work. Like it's I want jokes to land, because that things could go horrible at any moment, and I want the horrible things to have weight because you've had a fun time with these characters and you've enjoyed spending time with them. But I think I think there's times when the tonal, where you do find the wrong tone, or the audience doesn't want the tone. I mean, like I made Tales of Suspense at Marvel, where I was like, it's a buddy team up espionage thriller. I was like, this is a slam dunk. Like, this is going to be great. And the audience was just like, this isn't what we want at all. That we don't want the Winter Soldier and Hawkeye interrogating people and hating each other and getting on each other's nerves. They're like, we want big bombastic superheroes. And the audience was like, the book has a fan base and whatever, but certainly sales wise, the audience was very clear that I was way in the wrong of being like an espionage comedy. Was not correct. And I think that it wasn't correct in that the audience didn't want it, but it's the book I wanted to make. So like, Marvel would tell me that I was wrong, but I don't think I am. Like
well, so then kind of on the opposite side of that, how do you begin to put the pieces together to approach something that is more character driven, right? Like your work on the Punisher, like that's a character that has such a strong voice. I mean, and it's a book that you obviously made, you made a bunch of headlines for and really kind of drove that voice home, right? So is it easier to focus on something like that than it is potentially some of the other stuff?
I like you made some headlines on that. I count the number of times I ended up on Fox News for writing comics, and The Punisher was 2 of them, so I appreciate that. It's only been 4 in my career, but that's 4 more than most creators get, and 4 more than most creators want, because when you end up on Fox News, it doesn't make your inbox happy. Right. But the tone, not to label myself, I sound like really pretentious when I do this, but I think of myself as a character-driven writer. I'm a character-first writer. And so especially my creator-owned books often feel different because I build them from the character up. Yep. I build, like, in We're Taking Everyone Down With Us, I know who Annalise is before I know what her relationship to the world is, what's going on with her, what the tone of the book is. Like, I know who she is first. I know who the robot is before I know why there's a robot even. I'm just like, this is what this robot is, and this is how he acts, and this is, where he came from, and that informs everything. It informs the world, and it informs the hardships. And I can't do that as much at the big two, because I can't be like, this is Captain America. He's a skater from the East Bay. And, Captain America's Captain America, and I don't get to redefine him. And so it's harder to find that in. The Punisher is especially a funny one, because the Punisher is more than almost any other character in fiction, an immovable object. He is, you don't ever go, what is it's very complicated to tell a story about a character where when you present a situation, the entire audience knows exactly what the character would do. So the challenge is not, what's he going to do? The challenge is, how does the situation change around him? We're not moving the rocks, we're moving the water. And so he's a funny one to deal with in terms of that. I still tried to be like, I want him to be funny, but in a way that isn't breaking who Frank Castle is. And so when you want him to be funny, it's that he is such a straight man in such a comedic moment that it's unclear if he's being funny. There's, I ended up pairing him with the Winter Soldier and Black Widow. And I was just like, yeah, he just hates the Winter Soldier, and he just doesn't like him, and whatever. And there was a moment where he starts talking, the Winter Soldier starts talking about having to like hack a computer or something. And the Punisher says to him, like, don't you have a computer virus that lives in you? And the Winter Soldier is like, what? And he's like, wait, do you think I'm Cable? And that's like the whole thing. And it's not, and my editor called me and was like, does he think he's Cable? And I was like, I don't think so. I think he knows who the Winter Soldier is. He's just a dick. And he was like, well, that's kind of a joke. And I was like, but it's not played like a joke. It's unclear if he thinks he's Cable or not. And that's why he works. And so it's always the books I think have...
you also, but you do that too in, I feel like one of the
did I use that joke again? I probably did.
No. One of the panels that gets shared all the time, that I see all the time, is the exchange that Punisher has with Moon Knight.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and that's another...
Yeah, it's you don't know if he's joking, if Moon Knight's joking. Like, they're awful to each other, but it's funny, and that's
right.
And that's the sort of the dynamic you have to find. And the books I've done where I feel like it's worked, and I've gotten what I want out of it. Are the books where I can find a way to use the character that exists. And that's my in. Like, I've done books that are high concept of like, this crazy thing happens and these characters are here, and they don't work as well because I'm not that writer. I'm not John Hickman, where I'm like bringing an idea where you're going to put it down at night and be like, I can't stop thinking about, nightly news. I can't stop thinking about how, Manhattan Projects, like, there's so many Einsteins, it's so crazy. That's not how I tell stories. That's not how I work. And so I need to find,
but
when
is that
I deal
the kind
with
of writer you want to be inevitably? Or
it's the writer I wish I was, but I don't try and be that. Sure. Yeah, I mean, you always want to be the person you're not, right? You always want to look at the thing you can't do and say, I wish I could do that. Like, I can't do Grant Morrison, I can't do Alan Moore, I can't do Hickman. Like, I can't even begin to do those things. I can't do... There's a lot of writers out there who, bless them, some of them are writers who I love as people and I love their work, that are doing Grant Morrison impressions. That's their career. It's just like, I'm doing Grant Morrison. I'm wearing a little Grant Morrison mask and I'm selling you a book and you'll know what it is. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't if I wanted. I don't speak that language. And I could sit down and study it and try and do it. And, you see people be like, I'm writing like Alan Moore because I'm using a 9-panel grid. And it's like, well, you're not writing like Alan Moore. You're wearing Alan Moore's pants and showing up and thinking that you're doing his job, and you're not. Right. But yeah, no, I'm super jealous of that stuff. I get really in love with the stuff that feels impossible to me. It's the same reason, you watch the Olympics, which I don't, but if you did watch the Olympics, like, you want to see, I was going to say a basketball player, and I don't watch basketball, and my go-to is going to be Patrick Ewing. Like, you want to see Patrick Ewing dunk.
It's fine, we'll roll with it.
You want to see Larry Bird? Get out there. So I don't make steps to be that writer, but like, sure, I'm jealous of it. If nothing else, I don't act on that.
Right. So in that case, though, you had mentioned obviously the part of the process of what you're doing with, we're taking everyone down with us is for you. It sounds like building the world first is more paramount than necessarily figuring out the story, or like you have the idea of the story, but once you begin to build the world out, then you say, okay, let's see where it takes us. Is that accurate?
Yeah. That book's unusual because it literally started because Stefano and I were going to do a book at Marvel, and it got canceled in the pandemic, or it didn't get canceled, but we got kicked off of it in the pandemic, or I got kicked off of it in the pandemic. He did not. And he came to me and said, do you want to do a book? And then he sent me, I said, yeah. And he said, I have an idea. And he sent me a drawing of a robot and was like, that's it. That's the idea. And so it's literally started from a character design. But that's how I would probably start it anyway. But I tried to figure out how to do the robot, and I couldn't figure out what the book was with this robot protagonist. And I just it wasn't clicking. And it wasn't until I realized, like, oh, he's a sort of father figure for this other character, and it's her relationship to a damaged robot, and that's what the book is, and then I built them, and from there, from there the stakes get put in, and the tone gets put in, and the plot gets put in, and I knew the end before I knew most of it. Like, I didn't know why it ended a certain way. I didn't know why things happened, but I was like, this is what I see the end of this book being. I mean, it's funny because I'm working on another book that we haven't announced yet, that sort of spins out of this. It's totally unrelated, but like, it's a lot of things that I couldn't figure out how to do. After we moved on, I was like, no, I think I can figure out how to do it now. And so like, there's thematically similarities and things like that, but it's a completely different book. And that book literally started with me telling the artist, like, this is the last page of the book. And he was like, what else happens? And I was like, we're not there yet, man.
Don't worry.
Exactly. Like, I was like, this is the end. And he was like, I'm in. I love that. And I was like, cool. Like, let's go back. So
you get a bunch of work for hire stuff under your belt. You mentioned at the very beginning that you were obviously a huge Image fanboy from the very, very beginning.
For sure.
And so how was it a goal always for you to try and get something done at Image? Or, I mean, you could have just as easily potentially done more on the self-published route, but what
it is.
Let's talk about the getting in an Image.
Yeah, of course. Image is the gold standard. Like, it's not, there's a story. Hell, we're all friends here, right? No, whatever. We're going to tell a little story. Early on, in my time at Image, I was, my time well before Image, when I was still trying to figure things out, I had a thing that I was like, I think I can bring this to Image. I don't know how to get it in front of Eric Stevenson. I don't know how to do that. And I was friends with a young gentleman who was a podcaster named Ron Richards. And Ron Richards was like, I know Eric. I can get you a meeting with him at San Diego Comic-Con if you're going to be there. And I said, yeah. And he set up a meeting. And I was so incredibly nervous to meet with Eric and talk to him. And I was meeting him in the lobby of the hotel, and we were just going to have lunch and talk, or have coffee and talk, or whatever. And right before the meeting, literally 1 minute before, Ron just texted me, "Don't fuck up." Like, that was the text. And I felt the sweat coming out of my pores when I got that text message. And I have tattooed on my leg in a banner, it says "Don't fuck up," because Ron put that fear in me. And it's sort of a, like a guiding principle of like, you're gonna get a chance to walk into the room. This is the room you want to be in.
Right.
Like, be aware of that. Don't be you.
So wait, so where in your career is that?
It's very early. It's very early.
Very early.
Yeah. The thing I pitched to Eric, he was into, and then we couldn't make it work. with schedule and time. And so then it just fell apart, and Eric was like, yeah, I don't, come back when you got something else, and was very gracious and cool to me about it. And, he was doing it for Ron, not for me. Like, I didn't know who the fuck I was, but he was great. And it was super. But that to me was something that I held on to it so dearly that I went home and got it tattooed, because I was like, that was it. I got in the room and I didn't screw it up. I have to remember that. I have to remember, like, not to take any of this for granted. There's rooms you want to be in, and you're going to fight your whole career to be in them. And when you're there, go as hard as you can, make the most of it. And so that's been everything for me. We wanted, when Four Kids Walk Into a Bank came out, Eric came up to me at Seattle and was like, the book's really cool. Like, he said at Emerald City, he was like, your book's cool. And he was like, anytime you want to do something. And I was like, I could sit you down right now, but I don't want to screw it up. Like, I could just be like, here's 20 ideas. But I was like, no, I want to put together the right thing and bring it to him.
Okay.
And
so then where does What's the Furthest Place From Here?
Well, What's the Furthest Place From Here comes from a funny thing, because we knew we wanted to bring it to Image. That was our goal. Me and Tyler were like, well, you thought Four Kids was cool. Like, we should do it. And so we started a different book. And we got 2-3 months into that. We had character designs. I had a script. We had a title. We had all that stuff. Tyler was doing logos. And then at 3 a.m, I was like, man, this is Four Kids Walk Into a Bank again, but just sci-fi. Mm-hmm. This sucks. Like, we're a cover band of ourselves. Like, this is creatively bankrupt. Like, it's awful. And I called Tyler. I literally texted him at 3 a.m. I was like, we're making the same book again, and it sucks. We have to stop. And he texted me in a panic and was like, no, we're not. You're being an idiot. Stop. And then the next day, he called me and was like, it's the same book again. And I was like, it is, right? And he said, yeah. And I was like, look, Four Kids was good because we were pushing ourselves creatively. And now that we know how to do that, it's not going to be good because we're not pushing ourselves. So let's go back to the drawing board and do everything we didn't do in Four Kids and everything that's uncomfortable to us. Like, let's do big, broad sci-fi. Let's do an ongoing book. Let's do a large cast. Let's do all these things. And, go out of our comfort zone and see if we can find ourselves in there. And we did. We put together 5 pages, sent it to Eric, and he was like, this is great. We want to do this. And then 20 minutes later, he was like, do you want to come to Image Expo and announce the book in 3 weeks? And we were like, yes. And I didn't realize then. We were at the Image Expo, and it was in Portland. And we're backstage, and I'm, like, Rick Remender's there, and Robert Kirkman's there, Gerry, Duggan, all these guys, all these just amazing creators, and Jen Bartel is there, and Annie Wu's there, just a murderous row of talent. And we're going around talking to everyone, and everyone's like, oh, you want to see the first 5 issues of my book? Do you want to see the first 3 issues of my book? And we were like, we've done 5 pages. Like, we don't fully know what the first issue is. Like, we did that to sort of get a feel for it. And actually, the 5 pages we pitched aren't in the book. There's a 5-page pitch that we threw those pages out. So that was it. That was the introduction to being on Image, was walking on stage. And we just, for someone with a tattoo that says "Don't fuck it up," we fucked up so much stuff. It's pretty impressive. One of the things that was funny was the night before they were like, yeah, you have 5 minutes to talk. And Tyler was like, should we write stuff down? And I was like, 5 minutes is so little time, man. Like, we'll be fine. And I remember just getting up there, and like, you're waiting on the side of the stage, and I saw Todd McFarlane, and he's rehearsing what he's going to say. And he's doing a lot, and he's talking about a bunch of stuff, but he's going through notes. And I was like, oh man, Todd has notes? Like, Todd is the best showman, salesman in the history of the media, in the history of almost any medium, and he's got notes, and I'm gonna wing it. And I was like, maybe I'm misreading this. And we walked up and we start talking about the book, and we get a minute and a half in, and I look down, there's a countdown timer, and it's like 3:30 to go, and I was just like, oh my God, we have nothing to say. We don't know what the book is. And so that was a terrifying misstep. And then it took us a long time, because we were like, well, we want to do an oversized issue. And we did a large issue. And then we finished issue 2. And I was like, this should all be issue 1. And so we merged issue 2 into issue 1. And then we had a 60-page first issue. And so, like, we kept checking in with Image, and they'd be like, where are you now? And I'd be like, I remember the moment that I was like, we're almost done with issue 2. And then I was like, we're almost done with issue 1. And they were like, what are you talking about? You were an issue past that. I was like, issue 2 is now in issue 1. And there was just, I could just hear through emails, teeth clenching and head shaking that we were doing horribly, but it worked out okay. People like that first issue. I like it. I'm really proud of it. So
well, so when the when the guardrails are off, in a sense, right? Like what were some of the biggest learning experiences or shocks maybe in, you know, kind of coming off doing some of the work for hire stuff and then kind of getting back into, you know, the creator owned stuff in a way that, you know, you are responsible for your schedule.
Sure. Well, the schedule itself is a shock. Right. You know, it is and it isn't, but like literally making a book. I mean, we're finishing up issue 22 as we speak. Right. And, you know, we still have a bunch to go we have an end in sight, and we're in the end game of the book, but we're not there yet. And, it's not a shock, but just how much life gets in the way, where you're just like, oh, this person got COVID. Oh, this person on the team's car was stolen. This person is now like, you know, it's life in the 21st century, but like it is hilarious to me if you just went through, like, we've had all sorts of weird hiccups and problems and production and stuff on our end and distribution problems and manufacturing problems that were all, you know, learning experiences or like pandemic problems. But like I said once, if you made a list of what has gone on in this book, of the creative team, of just like literally a member of our team had to flee their country, like they were a refugee. You know, we've had multiple deaths in family. We've had people get very sick, cars stolen, houses falling apart. Like, it's just nonstop. Like, but it's not. It's just life, and everyone deals with that. But we've had an extremely bad run of luck, and it's been very difficult. And it's funny now because like the new issue is late, and part of the reason the issue is late is because they're making a Four Kids Walk Into a Bank movie, and we had to go, we're producers on the movie, and we had to go to, we didn't have to, but we went to set for a week. And so we were like, we lost a couple weeks there in production time, because like a good thing happened for the first time in the production of this book. There's a good problem, but it's still a problem, and it doesn't really matter. Like, the book is late. That was a big thing. The other thing that has been interesting to me is, when you write work for hire, when you write licensed characters, you never know what the audience is showing up for. You don't know if they're there because they like your story, they're there because they like that character, they like that cover, that artist, or like they just buy all these books on muscle memory, on instinct. They're collectors. And so it's sort of hard to get a metric on how you're doing sometimes, like, or the metrics you get are off. Like when I wrote Uncanny X-Men, you know, I wrote a very controversial run on Uncanny X-Men because I was told to kill all of them, and we knew that it was going to be rough. It was rough. Right. And people all the time would come up to me and be like, you know, I really love your X-Men. I really love it. I'm sorry that everyone hates it. And I'd be like, thank you, but also the book sells really well. Like, not everyone hates it. It's actually like the sales are going up. So it doesn't, like, it looks like everyone hates it because Twitter hates it, but that's not actually the case. Or maybe everyone does, but they're rage buying it. I don't know, but you just don't know. But like on a book like What's the Furthest Place From Here, you learn really quick that I was like, this is a book where we're not going to give people the answers right away. We're not going to hold people's hands. They're going to have to put things together. They're going to have to be patient. And we knew to a degree that we'd lose readership who weren't that kind of reader. And that's okay. Like, we made that decision. And we're like, when you aim for every audience, you aim for no audience. And we wanted to aim for an audience that's like us, that likes a mystery, that likes, you know, people who think Twin Peaks is fun, people who think like not understanding what's going on is fun, not for a little while, running to keep up with a story, like. And it's very, you know, we knew that still intellectually going in, but seeing it in action was fascinating, but also seeing the opposite, that when you give people a story that's not for everyone, the people who do find it care so much about it. Like, and we see it now of like, just every time we put out an issue, we just get the nicest letters I've ever gotten in my career of people being like, thank you for making this book. This book means so much to me. And people getting tattoos of the book, and people, you know, cosplaying the book, and all these things that are like really, really special and can only come when you're making something that's entirely your own from scratch.
I love that. So what would you say then? mean, it sounds like you have learned an immense amount going through the headaches and everything that just kind of came up during that. What do you feel are maybe some of the things you take away that makes the new book a bit easier, if it even is easier?
The thing I take away is actually that I don't particularly like things to be easier. I like the challenge, and so I'm like a vapor. I'm going to expand to fill the space of difficulty, and that's where stuff like constantly rewriting the book, which I don't normally do. Like, I do rewrite all the time, but it's normally like, well, it's done when the letterer gets it, and on this one it isn't, because we've just had so long, and I'm just like, yeah, it's just nagging at me. Things like that, I really do like pushing us to make things more challenging, because it's fun. You rise to the occasion. I don't think I operate well on cruise control. I don't think I operate well on, like, I just have to sit back and do the job. I operate best when it's a little bit chaotic and a little bit difficult and a little bit hard to wrap your head around. And so that's my takeaway from the mistakes in What's the First Place From Here, is that, like, I can handle that space, and I maybe thrive in that space of putting out fires, and some other people I work with may disagree with me, but, like, it's sort of comforting to just to constantly be, like, problem solving and finding solutions to things and busy. So that's a big thing. Other than that, I mean, this is an easier book. We're taking it down with us as an easier book than What's the First Place From Here. What's the First Place From Here is a hard book for people to get into by design. It's not for everyone. It's a weird, sprawling, epic thing. This is much smaller. It's
right.
It's two characters on the run. Like, you get it, and it's accessible, but it's still seeing how far I can take the accessible idea and how much I can make it weird and how much I can deviate from what people expect. And that's sort of the same idea of just, like, I walked it back and to be an easier thing, and now I'm pushing it again.
So let's talk about the new book.
Okay.
What let's start with what's the elevator pitch? What's the thing that the retailer is going to say at in their store that gets the person to say, shit, yep, picking it up?
I would like it if retailers told people that Absolute Batman was in it. That seems like the easiest one. Not in issue 1, but he'll be in issue 2 maybe.
He's coming.
But he's coming. That's the easiest one. If they're not going to do that, I would say I'm in my never-ending quest to make things difficult for myself. It's not that I come up with inscrutable premises. I just don't have the very simple comp premises where I can be like, it's, the Love Boat meets Jaws, like, or whatever. The Love Boat meets Jaws is just Jaws. I don't know. That was terrible. I'm terrible at this. So, like, the elevator pitch of, like, it's like Paper Moon or Leon the Professional meets, Diabolique is selling 0 books. Like, nobody on earth wants that except for me. But that's not really what it is. The book is it's set in a 1960s, 70s James Bond-esque world of sexy super spies and power-hungry villains. But our story follows the 13-year-old daughter of the world's greatest mad scientist. And she's grown up in seclusion on an island with her mad scientist father and his army of odd robots that are his protectors and helpers and all of that. And one day they are discovered. She did not know they were in hiding. Her life, as she's known it, has been normal, she assumed. And when they're discovered, she is forced to go on the run with her robot helper bodyguard. And she has a choice. She can decide to follow in her father's footsteps and try and get revenge for the people who took the things from her that she grew up with, and try and lead a bloody path of violence and destruction in the world, or she can try and make a play for having the normal life that she never had before. Now that she understands that there's a normalcy out in the world that she was never afforded, will she chase it? So it's a dark comedy, spy, sci-fi, buddy team up coming of age story, which is not easy, but also it makes it sound so complicated. But when you read it, it's like, it's very straightforward in what it is. It's just a lot of things that you know and understand put together in a slightly different way. But it's about a little girl and her robotic father figure as she's thrust into adulthood and is trying to figure out who she is and make decisions about who she wants to be in her life. And a lot of those decisions she makes involve a robot punching people's heads off. like some children deal with.
Right. I don't want you to necessarily give it away, but I need to shout it out, because when I read the first issue, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass or be a shill, because it's the image of it all, but not everyone. Writing first issues is hard, right? Ask anyone who does it; they will tell you writing first issues is hard. There is a level of suspense in this first issue that I think you knock out of the park and do incredibly well. And so I say that to say, anyone listening to this, you need to go tell your retailer you want a copy of this just for the first issue experience alone.
Yeah, don't read after
that. Because you won't. Well, I mean, look. You only get one. You only get that experience once, right? Reading any issues, but specifically in number one, right?
Sure.
Walk me through the building blocks of that in a sense that's not, again, right? Like, I know we got to be careful because I don't want to give it away, because it's great, but putting it together. When did you feel you nailed it? I know you're going to say never, because you're going to rewrite it 6 times and special edition it. But there had to have been some point where you were like, oh yeah.
The thing that took me a long time to realize is I'm going to start with saying a thing I don't like. It's not a shot at anyone. It works for most people. They're very good at it. It's not what I want to do. And that is, I don't like 19 pages, 21 pages of like very sort of tertiary setup, and then last page, this is the movie poster, this is the premise. I don't like that. And so I did a couple things to try and avoid that. But the thing that struck me early was, I just need more space. Like, I need you to care about these characters and understand that the world they live in feels normal to them. And then have to understand that the world they live in is not normal and is very dangerous. And that takes time. And so the first issue is almost 40 pages because that was key. If I was just like, it's a girl who lives on an island with a mad scientist, you'd immediately be like, oh, that's bad. And obviously, something bad's going to happen. It's a comic book.
Sure.
But it's not Love and Rockets. Like, no one goes into that being like, something bad's going to happen. But, It's a comic with more punching than that. But like, I needed the reader to believe in the normalcy of their life and then watch it get pulled away. And I think a big part of that for me was figuring out that Annalise, our protagonist, you're following her and you're discovering the world as she does. So there is that suspense builds because she is caught off guard. It's not that she thinks things have been normal and then suddenly they're abnormal for her. It's about like, well, she's never thought about it at all. This is just life. Like, this is the routine of her life, and the routine of her life is going to slowly crack and crumble. And in that, danger is going to seep in, and she's going to realize that she was always living a life that was sort of precarious and on thin ice. And that takes time. That takes time to sort of build the trust and build the characters, and so you care about the characters. And so I think that's when it clicked, when I was like, we're going to go to 40 pages on this. Like, this is going to be 40 pages, and my printer bill's going through the roof, but it's worth it. The book reads better. Like you said, like, you only get one shot at this. I only get one shot at selling it to you, so I need it to be as good as I can. And that was the big thing, is the space. But I think the other thing is just we don't answer the question at the end of the first issue. We don't tell you this is the inciting incident and it's going. We sort of, there's still questions at the end of the first issue. So you're building to a thing that still leaves you on unsure footing. And getting more into that would give too much away, I think. But like, sure. there are a plethora of twists coming that some people can guess at and some people will definitely not guess at. And that means that all of it is very tenuous. The whole world is very, very fragile. And I think that's a big part of what we were going for, is just that the idea of taking this girl's life and suddenly making it very fragile.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me a bit about working with Stefano on this, because I feel like this is you and him operating on a totally leveled up level in a sense. And I think a lot of that obviously has to do with Jordy and you know, everyone kind of coming together to put this together. But you mentioned that like a lot of this kind of, let me back up. You had mentioned that when you initially were trying to put books together, right? You were putting you had your story and putting the wrong artist on it. And this is one that like, obviously you nailed. And so talk to me about that and how that why it works as opposed to the how it works.
I think it works because I worked with Stefano on The Punisher for a bit and I thought he was great. And we went on and have done some other stuff together, and we were supposed to do that other book, and we did a Grifter story together. And when you work at the big two, so much of your work is done without knowing who you're working with. Often you're writing a script and you can't write to someone's strengths or weaknesses because you don't know who's getting the script until you're done, or you're not planning a story around your collaboration. You're just writing you're throwing down the middle and hoping that the catcher is setting up the same way. And then so I knew Stefano was very good, but going into this, I was like, well, I'm going to push him a little bit. I want to challenge him. And what I learned very quickly is that he is also doing the same thing. He was going to Marvel and DC and being like, you're going to give me one down the middle, I'm going to just give you a straightforward book. And he's done amazing straightforward books. He did Black Panther and Hellblazer and Daredevil and X-Men, and they're great. But this is me being like, how far can I push you on some of this stuff? And him being rising to every occasion. And I learned very quickly that like, he's a great action artist. He's great with action. He's great with emotion and acting of characters. He's really good with mood and ambiance and setting and building these things. But above all, the principle that guides Stefano is storytelling, ease of storytelling. Mm-hmm. He's just immersive. He never wants to pull you out of a page. And if he does something that is going to challenge that, there's a reason. And there's thought behind every choice. And so I realized the more I push him on, like, we'll make the action crazier. Let's do more character moments. Can we do this without dialogue? Can we do it in her expressions and body language? And he's been able to do it and all keep it equally as readable. And I think that has made me a better writer because I just trust him implicitly at this point. Mm-hmm. Like, issue 2 is a better looking book than issue 1. Issue 3 is better looking than issue 2, and issue 4 is better looking than issue 3. And that's not because he's getting better. It's because I'm realizing that there's nothing he can't do. There's no asks I can give him. And so the asks are going through the roof, and he's just nailing it and making it fun and weird, but never sacrificing readability. And that to me is like, I love a complicated art. I love having a page you have to study. I love J.H. Williams. I love, Chris Ware. I love things like that. But for my own books, I want them to just be immersively readable. I don't want you ever to like have to turn the page over or like reread something to figure out the order. And Stefano is going to bring that every time of just like, you never, by issue 2, you should forget you're reading a comic book. And if you're going to read the series in trade on page 160, when you close it, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I was reading a book. That's our goal.
Okay. So talk me through then working with your colorists and setting the atmosphere, because that really takes what Stefano is doing to a whole nother level. But also too, are you, where does the tone of it come from? Are you kind of giving examples? Because there is, you talked about the retrofuturism aspect of all of this, and I think like when you put that color layer on it, it really brings it all together.
Yeah, I think the colorists we're working with, Roman Titov and Jason Wordie, are tag teaming the book, and both of them have worked on What's the First Place From Here with me, and they're both amazing. And the sort of marching orders I gave, as much as I give them marching orders because they're amazing and really good at what they do, the marching orders I gave was like, Stefano is going to do realism. He's going to do clean lines and neat lines and give you a world that makes sense. We don't want to try and make it look like a superhero book. We don't want to look like we're trying to make Batman comics. We want it to feel a little dreamier, a little heightened sense of reality. Like, make your color palettes a little crazier. Like, don't go blue sky, go purple sky. Don't go, put some. But also, I said to them, I was like, look, his line work is really clean and neat, and that's a selling point for me. That's what I love. Don't render it. Don't put a ton of textures on it. Don't let the line work speak. Go flat colors. Like, and it's funny because talking to Roman first when he started, he was like, well, I'm worried it's going to be, what I do is dull. And I said, if you're worried it's going to be dull, then your chance to change that is in the color palette. Like, the rendering and the textures are not where you're going to shine on this book. The color choices are where you're going to shine. Anything. And because of that, they do an amazing job of stepping up to make shots more interesting and panels more interesting when they need to be, but they never overpower the art, and they know when to scale it back and when to just be like, this is mood, this is tone. And so there's an amazing, I mean, I hate to always use the band metaphor, but like, they're great at playing together because they know when to take a solo and when to step back and let Stefano take the lead on the art. And Haas, our letterer, is the same way, that like, he's the best letterer in comics, and he's going to bring something, but he knows when to do the weird thing and when to not. And I think all of them understand that it's like, we're chasing readability, we're chasing mood and ambiance, and you're going to have moments to shine there, and you're going to have moments to be quiet, and they all know exactly their parts in it, and it's beautiful. And for me, it's been a lot of me being like, okay, I have to draw back the dialogue, I have to walk some of this down because I'm stepping on what these guys are doing now,
right?
And so that's, yeah, I mean, I'm riding a lot of coattails on this one, and very happy to do it because I hired them, so I still feel like I did cool,
I mean, look, I mean, there is a panel that it's one of the robots just staring directly into the camera, and like the light coming from his eyes, and you just kind of see it. Like I was like, oh, that's some good shit.
It's funny because I think a lot of people know Stefano's work, and he's great, and he's got a lot of fans, and he's very popular. And everybody who looks at this book is just like, oh, why is this? And I said, we built a team to complement him, and we told him to do what he wanted to do. Like, no one is holding his hand. No one is telling him, follow after this person or try and do this. And when you let him go, this is the artist he is. And he's an A-list artist. He's a home run hitter for sure.
Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, I've taken up a ton of your time, so before I let you go, I'll ask you. We'll try and get 2 or so more questions in for you. What is the thing that you're hoping fans take away from the first issue? What is the thing that when they get to the end, they're immediately like, sub me for the rest of time?
I mean, the main one is that I hope they're excited to see Absolute Batman. But after that, I wish I had, especially in times like these, some amazingly thought-provoking answer. Yeah. I'm not Dennis Camp. I'm not going to say something that's super smart. I love him. But he's, his book is maybe going to change your life. My book is going to make you have, I hope you have a really good time with the book.
Look, there's something to be said about just having a good time with a book. And I think this is a book that delivers with it.
Yeah. I mean, there's heavier things in the book. Like the book is a meditation on the way violence ripples through people's lives and how it doesn't just affect the victim, but also the families and the community and the world around them. And there's, stuff about growing up and choosing who you want to be and your relationship with your parents and all of that. And all of that's in there. And like, at the end of the day, the book is about empathy and can you learn empathy and be taught empathy and like, how important is empathy and how important is it for you to stick up for yourself and the idea of revenge and all of those things are in there. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to say that's what I want people to take away because it's not. I want people, if they're going to a comic shop and laying down, they worked a bunch of hours and I mean, they don't have to work. Hopefully you don't have to work a bunch of hours to buy the first issue of this book. If you do, there's labor laws and stuff. You can talk to people, but hopefully they worked a good, 1 to 15 minutes or 20 minutes to pick up the book and it gave them enjoyment and they thought that was fun and they care about the characters. The thing I want is for people to care about these characters because we care about them and they're going to explore a bunch of stuff we want to talk about, but just enjoy the book. Yeah.
Hey, that's perfect.
Yeah.
One of the things I've been doing at the end of these is asking folks to, let's say someone is a lapsed reader or someone who maybe hasn't experienced comics for the first time. What is the recommendation? Not of your work, but like what is the book that you would give them that would convert anyone into a comic book fan if given the opportunity?
The book I would give to anyone to be like, you're gonna fall in love with comics. Man. That's brutal. I'm a big sucker for Why the Last Man. That's an easy one. I think it does a lot of things that you're only getting in comics, and it's a tour de force in falling in love with characters and spending time with them. Powers is a big one for me. That's a huge foundational work, and Love and Rockets. Like Love and Rockets is just the just sort of, if you have humanity, there's something that you're going to fall in love with in Love and Rockets. Like those are the big ones. And then also issue 22 of What's the Furthest Place From Here. Start there.
Matt, this has been an absolute blast.
That was great.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And for those listening to this show in real time, make sure to pick up a copy of Matt's new book. We're taking everyone down with us in March. It's going to be a rockin' good time. If you're listening to this like 3 years later, there's probably like 3-4 trades out by now. So go buy all of them.
Yeah. Just buy the omnibus. It cost us a lot to
buy the omnibus
It cost us a lot to print that. So yeah.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. One of the realest conversations that we've had on the show with the one Mr. Matt Rosenberg. I love that guy. That guy loves comics, and it's so evident in his work. In just hearing him talk about comics makes me want to go read a bunch more comics. So, hope you enjoyed the show. I've got a few awesome listener reviews that I'd love to share with y'all. I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate the support and what we're trying to do here with the show. The show grows week by week, and that's because I believe it's you guys sharing the good word. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This one comes from Victor is Husky, headlined Gateway to Indie Comics. I wasn't familiar with the original version of this show, however many years ago that was, so I'm listening to this with no previously conceived feels. That being said, it's a wonderful entry point for people curious about the biggest movers in independent comics. Both informative and conversational, the rapport between the host and the guest is a delight. And it's not complicated, folks. It's really good stuff. Something for everyone here. Highly recommend. Dude, thank you so much. What a lovely, lovely review from that. Another one is from Kiefer246. Keep up the good work. Loving the interviews so far. Thank you so much. A headline, best interviews. And the last one we've got on the iTunes front is a headlined and unexpected find in the world of comics. I don't usually have the patience to sit through anything longer than 15 minutes, but somehow I find myself fully locked in for the hour-plus episodes of this podcast. That alone says a lot. Growing up, I've always loved comics, but I've never really thought about the people behind them, the writers, artists, editors, and everyone else who makes this industry work. Viscardi has completely changed that for me. His podcast doesn't just highlight the stories on the page, it pulls back the curtain on the craft itself, showing just how intricate, personal, and fascinating the creative process is. Hearing his guests talk about their journeys, influences, and approaches to storytelling has made me appreciate comics on an entirely different level. And a big part of why this works is Viscardi himself. He's not just throwing out questions for the sake of it. He listens, he engages. He listens, he engages. The conversations flow naturally because he actually cares about what his guests have to say, and that makes all the difference, or to me at least. If you're into comics, storytelling, or just love hearing passionate people talk about what they do, this is a must listen. Oh my gosh, this review may make me cry. Jill88, thank you. That one hits right in the, and like, not just because you said a bunch of nice things for me, but I think that hits a lot of other things that, that we're trying to do here. We got a few on Spotify, some Spotify episodes that we can read as well. This one is from Bodo on the Dennis Camp episode. Super insightful all around, loving Camp's work. It broke 20th Century Men broke him off a slight downward trend on comic reading, and since he's been reading more and more different authors, he really appreciates the Ice Cream Man recommendation that Dennis Camp made in that episode. And also he's been enjoying Creepshow and loves the horror niche. First time listener, now subbing, or whatever you do here. Thank you, Bodo. Really do appreciate that. Comment from Miguel Felicio 67 on the Bug Expert talk we had with Jason Aaron. Why the heck am I listening to Bug Talk and working at midnight? Even worse, why the heck am I enjoying it? That was a fun episode, so I really do. I love the response that we've got there. Last one I will highlight for today is from Blong on the Marjorie Liu episode. Loved hearing how Marjorie got her start through romance novels and then through the Marvel novels. What an interesting story. Thanks for bringing these creator stories to us. It's always fun to get to know my favorite creators. I also loved your Jason Aaron chat along with the Bug Expert's take on his new book. That was a really fun and fresh idea for a creator interview. Look, that's what we're trying to do here. We're going to try and do some more of those. All right, that's enough of that. That's enough of me reading about how great you guys think the podcast is. I'm just kidding. I love your enthusiasm. I love your support. I could not do it without you guys. So that said, look, you got a great recommendation from Matt at the end of the episode on a new book to go read. So if that's a book you go check out this weekend, let me know. Make sure you head on over to your retailer at some point if you're going to the comic shop this weekend and tell them, hey, I need a copy of Matt's new book because it is going to make waves. I guarantee it. All right. And then like I said, just try something new because the more you keep reading comics, we will keep talking about them. We'll catch you next time.